friends, coming to you today with another recommendations video. Today we're going to be recommending books from Puerto Rico. And so because I don't have a ton of recommendations, I'm going to include a collaboration from my friend Alba, who runs the channel Seriella. So I'm going to tell you about the two books that I have to recommend from Puerto Rico, and I've talked to you about them before because they were books that were picks for the Run Right Reads book club earlier this year. So I have a full review video where I talked about the books a little bit more in depth. So I'm going to link that down below just in case I say something in that video that I don't mention here today. It's my memory. It's not that the books are not great, because they are fantastic. And I wanted to specifically make this video because Puerto Rico is a Caribbean territory. It is not an independent country. It is a territory of the United States. So it probably doesn't get a lot of love as a Caribbean space. But it is no less Caribbean than any other part of the Caribbean. So this year I wanted to be intentional about reading books from countries that were not independent Caribbean countries. And so Run Right Reads Book Club visited Puerto Rico earlier this year. And so I want to recommend the two books that we talked about: The House on the Lagoon by Rosario Ferre and The Taste of Sugar by Marisol Vera. So those are the two books that I'm going to be recommending to you today. But Alba is going to tell you about more Puerto Rican literature, fiction and non-fiction. And so at the end of this video, after I tell you briefly about what I loved about these two books, then you'll hear from Alba and she'll tell you more about Puerto Rican books. I'll also link down below a list of other recommendations from the Caribbean that I'm going to invite you to check out and find more Caribbean books to love. So first I wanted to mention The House on the Lagoon by Rosario Ferre. This I thought was just splendid. This is a novel written in a very unique way. We have a main character who is writing specifically to the reader. We have a main character who's writing a novel, and we have interspersed testimonies from her husband, who is reading her manuscript and communicating directly to the reader. So we have a novel being juxtaposed with a fictional character trying to tell us that this is not quite how the history went. I thought that was just brilliant as a way to tell the story of Puerto Rico fictionalized. So this main character is living in a house, and she talks about the history of the house, how the house came into being, how the house has impacted the family members. This woman has married into this family, and the family's legacy, or the family's patriarch, was an immigrant from Spain who came to Puerto Rico and found his fortune. And there are varying accounts about how he made his fortune, whether or not he was involved as a spy during the war, or he made money committing treason. And it's just really interesting how the author uses this main character and her being outside of the family to weigh in on how some of these things happen. But you also see her benefiting from the legacy, benefiting from this house, benefiting from the relationships that she has been a part of because of this house. And it's just, this book is just brilliantly done. We have two families inhabiting this house, and it's a grand house. And like I said, we go into the details of how this house comes about, the architecture, and a little bit about the architect and the relationship that allowed the architect the access to build this house, why the house was kind of demolished, why it was rebuilt. But also there's a little bit of discussion of race in Puerto Rico, because there are two families inhabiting this house. There is the main family, the owners, who occupy the main space, and then there are the black people who live in the cellar, and how they are talked about, and the different degrees of power that the two families, the two representations of race have in this family and in this story. Is just brilliant. This was one of my favorite books that I have read this year, and this was set in Puerto Rican daughter. Alba was a part of our book club discussion when we were reading this book, and she told us that Rosario Ferre was the daughter of a politician in Puerto Rico. And so it's interesting that she's the one writing this account and teaching us about some of these things in Puerto Rico. So this is fantastic. I'm going to invite you to read this book, whether you read it for CaribAThon. There are only a few days left in CaribAThon. Whether you read it this month for the entire Read Caribbean celebration of Caribbean heritage, or you just pick up this book anytime in the future, want you to put this on your TBR, The House on the Lagoon by Rosario Ferry. The other book I want to recommend to you is A Taste of Sugar by Maricel Vera. This one is no less fantastic. No less fantastic. I really enjoyed this book. The Taste of Sugar by Maricel Vera, also set in Puerto Rico. This is set in a slightly different time. We are talking about the Spanish-American War and how Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans got involved fighting in the war, and what happened to them before, what happened to them after, and how their experiences differed from their expectations. In this one, we're following a young girl, and we're really focusing on women and what happens to women in relationships. The expectations that women have as they go into relationships versus the experiences. And so this author also really brilliantly used women and the experiences of women, and used this specific main character to show us the life of Puerto Ricans, to show us the expectations of Puerto Ricans as they got into this marriage relationship with the United States, what they expected, and what happened, the net result of their sacrifices, what that merited them, what that netted them. I thought that this was fantastic. We got a chance to see the experiences of people living in Puerto Rico and how they wanted their own independence, how they wanted freedom. And it's just a really sad story. It's a sad story as it happens to the character, but it's also a sad story as we reflect on what happened to our country. In this one, as well as in this, there's a little bit of political talk about how people want different things politically. We're talking about the different views on whether people wanted independence, they wanted to be a republic, they wanted to be a state of the United States, and that kind of thing. And Maricel Vera does it brilliantly by metaphorizing it through the life of this young girl, Valencia, who gets into a marriage, and it's not what she expects, it's not what she wanted, but she decides to make the best of it, and just how she has to sacrifice things that she loses along the way, like she loses a child, and it is a really heartbreaking loss. Very difficult to read for me because I'm a young mother, a new mother. So not if I should say that I'm young. So yeah, I love this book. I love this book. I love both of these books. These are the only two books that I have read from Puerto Rico for a long, long time. Maybe ever. I can't recall reading another book that was Puerto Rican. So we're going to cut now to Alba, giving you more recommendations, better recommendations, hopefully more articulate than I have been. And we're going to come back and we're back with the video. So stay tuned for Alba.
Hola mi gente, ¿cómo están? Mi nombre es Alba Mar y estoy hablando desde Puerto Rico. Hello, my name is Alba Mar and I'm talking to you from Puerto Rico. I want to thank Karen so much for the opportunity to talk about books from and about Puerto Rico. You know that Puerto Rico was a Spanish colony for 400 years when the United States invaded in 1898. So I'll be showing you books written by authors in Spanish as well as books in English about Puerto Rico. Okay? And I will show them to you now. Thanks again, Karen, for the opportunity to showcase books about Puerto Rico. Bye.
That was Alba, and I hope that you found some other books to love, to write down, to add to your TBR list, and to come back and read sometime. Anytime is a good time to read Caribbean literature. So I'm going to invite you to click the links down below if you want to hear me talk a little bit more about the books that we discuss as we discuss them in the RunwrightReads book club. Also visit the links down below if you want to purchase these books. Check out some other videos that I have linked down below. Would love to have you peruse my content. If you're new to my channel, if this is your first time watching one of my videos, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Hope you'll stick around. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it. 2 thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you are inclined to do so. Share this video with someone else who you think could benefit from hearing about Puerto Rican literature. And I guess we'll chat in the next video. So until then, happy CaribAthon and happy reading. Bye.